My family tried to sell me into marriage for a business deal, so I eloped with a broke mechanic instead, and then I never thought pot roast could trigger an existential crisis. But that's exactly what happened last Sunday when I showed up at my parents' house for what was supposed to be a regular dinner. Griffin dropped me off around the corner so no one would see him, and I walked in pretending like everything in my life wasn't about to fall apart. My mom had the kitchen windows steamed up from boiling carrots, and my dad was slouched on the recliner with a beer in one hand and the TV remote in the other. Everything looked normal until I noticed there were 2 extra chairs at the table, set with the fancy plates my mom only uses when she's trying to impress someone. When I asked her who else was coming, she casually mentioned Doug and Clyde like it was just any other visit and not the beginning of a complete breakdown in trust. Doug has been my dad's best friend since forever. They run contracting crews together and share some kind of odd codependent dynamic that I've never fully understood. His son Clyde, however, I barely know. All I really remember about Clyde is that he once ate an entire plate of deviled eggs at a family barbecue, and that he always smells like laundry detergent. The last time we spoke, I think I was 19, and he was ranting about how the internet was destroying masculinity. Anyway, I sat down at the dinner table between my sister Tessa and a bowl of overcooked green beans. She kept elbowing me under the table and raising her eyebrows, which I ignored because I was too busy trying to act like I wasn't suspicious. Clyde showed up wearing a stiff button-down shirt with the tag crease still visible down the middle, and I knew right then something weird was happening. My mom served him the biggest slice of roast, while giving me this look like she was waiting for me to spontaneously burst into tears of gratitude. Meanwhile, my dad wouldn't even look at me. He was focused entirely on the dinner rolls. It wasn't until we were halfway through dessert that the truth dropped like a concrete block on my spine. My dad cleared his throat in that dramatic way he does when he's about to say something that he knows will piss everyone off, but he's already decided he's right. "Marley, Doug and I have been talking," he began, and my stomach immediately tightened because I've heard that phrase before and it's never once ended in anything good. "Clyde's ready to settle down," Doug added like we were announcing a high school dance date and not a literal life-altering decision. And we figured what better way to solidify our future than through family. I stared at him with my fork still halfway to my mouth, frozen mid-bite like I could somehow stop time and make the entire situation disappear. "Wait, what?" I finally asked, and I already knew what they were going to say, but I needed to hear it out loud because part of me still hoped this was just a bizarre misunderstanding. My dad leaned forward, ignoring the fact that I looked like I was about to vomit onto my plate. "We're expanding the company. Doug's retiring soon. Clyde will step up, and it just makes sense. You two together, it's the smart choice." I looked across the table at Clyde, who was very obviously doing everything he could to avoid making eye contact. He had that strange, passive look on his face like he wasn't even really present, just physically occupying space while the grown-ups made decisions for him. And that's when I said it. Not even as a revelation, but as a statement of fact everyone already knew. "I'm dating Griffin," I told them. Not loud, not defiant, just tired. Because I was so damn tired of pretending this wasn't going to come to a head eventually. My mom scoffed like I'd said I wanted to move to the moon. "Oh, sweetheart, that's just a phase. You're young. You don't understand what matters yet." My dad waved his hand like I was interrupting a business meeting. "Griffin's a decent kid, but he's going nowhere. Clyde has a future. He's got skin in the game. This is about building something lasting." I wanted to laugh, but it wouldn't come. Instead, I just said, "I'm not marrying someone to save your damn business." That's when the shift happened, when my dad's face went from patronizing to purple with rage. "This isn't about romance, Marley. This is about security, about legacy." I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping hard against the tile. "I'm not a chess piece, Dad. I'm not here to be moved into position for your next power play." I was already grabbing my jacket when he said the line that's haunted me every hour since. "You've got until the end of the month to end things with that boy. We're announcing the engagement at Doug's birthday party." I didn't even respond. I just left. Griffin was waiting in his old Pontiac, engine idling with that signature rattle it's had since last winter. I got in without saying a word, and we drove in silence to the 24-hour Walmart where we'd planned to grab light bulbs and milk before everything imploded. We sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes before either of us spoke. "You okay?" he finally asked. I shook my head. My dad just tried to auction me off for a business deal. He put a hand on mine and didn't say anything else, because what could he possibly say? It's been 4 days since that night, and my phone has become a war zone. My mom keeps sending messages filled with phrases like, "Think about the family," and "You're being unreasonable." Tessa warned me that Dad isn't bluffing, that he's been telling everyone the engagement is happening, and they've already paid for some upscale barn venue for a joint celebration. My cousin Camille texted asking if it was true and if I really ran off with a mechanic. I haven't answered anyone but Tessa, who swore she wouldn't tell them I've been staying at Griffin's. I'm trying to keep it together. We've been talking about moving in together anyway, once his lease ends in a few weeks, but now everything feels like it's happening too fast for all the wrong reasons. His apartment is barely big enough for one person, let alone two. But it's quiet here. No lectures. No expectations. No one trying to assign a dollar value to my future. Sometimes I think maybe I'm being dramatic. Maybe I should just go along with it and buy myself time. But then I look at Griffin, still working extra shifts fixing trucks to save for a used sofa, and I know I can't. Because even if it's hard, even if it means sleeping on a mattress on the floor and sharing one bathroom sink for everything we own, at least this life is mine. And I'll be damned if I trade that for a contract dressed up as a marriage proposal. It's been 10 days since the dinner that cracked my life in half, and everything since has felt like I'm sprinting underwater, slow, panicked, and entirely out of breath. Griffin's studio is barely holding together as our temporary bunker. We've got 2 plastic folding chairs, a mattress on the floor, and a borrowed kettle we use for everything from coffee to heating water for sink showers. The kitchen sink leaks, and there's no real closet, just a metal rod hanging from 2 nails and whatever space we can make under the bed. Still, it's safer than going back home to a house where love has conditions and I'm expected to become a sacrificial offering for someone else's financial plan. I went back once, snuck in during mid-morning when I was sure both of my parents would be at work. I just needed a few more clothes, my toothbrush, and my laptop charger. What I wasn't expecting was to find Tessa on the couch, sniffling under a blanket with a cold, a box of tissues on one side, and a bottle of generic cough syrup on the other. She didn't even flinch when I walked in. "Figured you'd come," she said between sniffles, and just like that, we were quietly sorting through the fallout together. Tessa filled me in on everything while I shoved socks and jeans into a duffel bag like I was robbing my own closet. Doug's business, the one Clyde is supposed to inherit like some royal birthright, is barely staying afloat. Apparently, my dad's been pouring money into Doug's operation for years, loan after loan, each one more desperate than the last. According to Tessa, they've both convinced themselves that merging the businesses through marriage would solve everything, tie the companies into a neat little bow, and make them look stable enough to attract outside investors. It's not just about tradition or appearances anymore. It's survival. My life is supposed to be their lifeline. It gets worse. My mom apparently signed a venue contract weeks ago, a fancy vineyard barn out on Route 9 that smells like rosemary candles and overpriced dreams. The venue was originally booked under the guise of Doug's birthday celebration, but it's written in ink as an engagement party. Non-refundable deposit, too. Thousands already lost unless they go through with the event. They've been using the booking contract to guilt me like it's some kind of ancient scroll. "You can't back out now," my mom texted yesterday. "People are expecting this." As if a venue and a plate count obligate me to hand over the rest of my life. Back at Griffin's, things aren't exactly easier. His car failed inspection, and the repairs cost more than the entire vehicle is worth. His hours got cut at the garage, and I'm still trying to pick up any shift I can at the bookstore while pretending I'm not one personal emergency away from emptying my savings entirely. We barely have enough space for ourselves, let alone a crisis. The bathroom cabinet can't hold my toiletries, so everything lives in a tote bag under the sink. The other day, I found my mascara next to the rice noodles and almost cried, not because of the mess, but because that's just our life now. Survival on top of chaos. Tension layered over affection. The worst part is the way my parents keep trying to reframe all of this like I've lost my mind. They've started calling extended family members, crying to anyone who'll listen about how ungrateful I am, how I've been led astray by a man with no future, how I'm ruining what they spent decades building. Camille came by last night to drop off a sweater she'd borrowed, and she stood in the doorway looking like she was about to deliver a eulogy. "Your mom's been calling everyone," she whispered. Like, sobbing on the phone. "She says you're throwing away your legacy." I asked her whose legacy she meant. She didn't answer. I tried to focus on what we can control. Griffin and I applied for a small 2-bedroom in the complex near Joel's place. Nothing fancy, cracked floors, a busted screen door, no dishwasher, but it was ours. We scraped together the deposit and waited, hoping. A few days ago, we found out we didn't get it. The landlord's nephew needed a place, and he took it. Just like that, we're back to zero. Griffin's lease is up in 2 weeks, and we still don't have a plan. Joel offered us his spare room, but he lives in the converted garage of his parents' house and still eats meals with his mom most nights. Taking that offer would mean stepping backward, and neither of us wants to admit we've run out of moves. We've started sleeping with our phones on silent because of the nonstop calls from relatives I haven't spoken to in years. All of them have opinions. All of them seem to think my love life is some kind of communal decision. Tessa says my dad's threatening to write me out of the will like that means anything to me when there's nothing left to inherit but a failing company and a leaky roof. Still, the weight of it hangs heavy on us. Every moment of quiet feels like something is waiting to explode. Griffin tries to keep things light. He still hums while washing dishes, still sneaks candy into my coat pockets when I'm having a bad day. But I know it's getting to him. Yesterday, I caught him standing in the snack aisle, staring at a row of instant noodles like he was trying to decode the secrets of the universe from a soup label. He looked so tired I almost cried right there next to the off-brand mac and cheese. We haven't talked about marriage, not seriously. We've joked about it over greasy takeout and old sitcom reruns, but it always felt like a far-off maybe. Now, it feels like something we might need just to reclaim our lives from the mess everyone else made. I'm not naive enough to think a marriage certificate will magically solve anything, but at least it would be ours. Ours in a way that none of this forced arrangement garbage ever could be. I don't know what's going to happen next. Every day feels like a balancing act between survival and stubbornness. But when I wake up in the morning and hear Griffin snoring lightly, one arm flung over his eyes, or when he hands me coffee in a chipped mug with a dumb grin on his face, I know one thing for sure. I'd rather be here in a too-small apartment eating noodles off paper plates than standing in a vineyard with a man I barely know while my parents count their business contracts like wedding gifts. The idea came to us on a Wednesday night after a shift that left me sore, sticky, and too exhausted to argue with anyone anymore. Griffin had picked me up from work in his rattling car with the broken passenger side mirror, and we stopped by the gas station for microwavable mac and cheese and a pack of dollar cookies. We sat on his mattress watching the neighbor's cat prowl along the fence behind the window, the one we'd named Stella even though she didn't belong to anyone. I don't remember who said it first, maybe him or maybe me, but once the words were out there, neither of us took them back. What if we just did it ourselves? Not a wedding, not the fantasy that my mother had probably been planning since the second I hit puberty, but something real. Just us. No guests, no deals, no expectations. A courthouse. A signature. A start that belonged only to us. We both had the upcoming Tuesday off, which felt random enough to keep things quiet and simple. Joel agreed to come as our witness without asking too many questions, just nodded and said, "Hell yeah, let me find a button down." The next few days were a blur of nervous planning and whispered logistics. I ordered a dress from Amazon that looked sweet in the photos, but arrived smelling faintly like plastic and desperation. Griffin cleaned his one decent shirt, the one he usually saves for interviews or funerals. On the morning of the ceremony, everything went wrong. The zipper on my dress jammed, Griffin's car refused to start, and let out a noise like a dying lawnmower. We ended up splitting an Uber with Joel, who brought a box of off-brand donuts as a pre-wedding gift. The driver kept asking why we were dressed up. We said it was a court thing. Technically, not a lie. The ceremony took less than 10 minutes. The clerk processing our paperwork was chewing gum and scrolling her phone with one hand, and a guy behind us in line was clearly there for jury duty, muttering to himself about parking tickets. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't beautiful. But Griffin held my hand the entire time, and we couldn't stop grinning like idiots when they pronounced us married. Joel took pictures on his phone. Most were blurry. A few caught me mid-laugh or blinking. But there was one perfect shot. We're standing under a crooked government seal, both laughing, and I'm just about to drop the $12 ring we bought from a discount kiosk. That photo became the announcement. We didn't want to call anyone. Didn't want to explain. So we posted it. One photo, one line. We did a thing. Camille was the first to react, a string of heart emojis followed by a cautious, "Are you okay?" Tessa called right after, halfway between laughing and crying, her voice cracking through the speaker like she didn't know whether to cheer or panic. I could hear the relief under her worry, though. She knew this wasn't just a stunt. She knew I meant it. My mom saw the post while at the grocery store and immediately called me from the parking lot, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her through the static and broken sentences. She said she couldn't show her face at church again, that I had humiliated the family, that she'd never expected this from me. She kept talking about the deposit, about the people invited, about how everything was already set in motion and how could I just throw it all away. I didn't know how to answer. I just stood in the tiny motel bathroom holding the phone and letting her spiral until she finally hung up. Tessa told me later that Dad smashed his phone against the garage wall when he found out. Doug showed up at our house ranting about how I'd ruined everything and demanding to know how my parents had lost control. Clyde, meanwhile, liked the post and commented, "Congrats," which honestly felt like the most surreal part of all of it. Like we just won a school raffle, not stepped out of an arranged marriage that was never really about love to begin with. Apparently, that didn't go over well. Doug nearly blew a vein when he saw it. Extended family started weighing in faster than I could mute notifications. I got Facebook messages from aunts I haven't seen since high school, texts from cousins I've never liked, and even one email from a distant uncle titled "Marriage is a Sacred Bond." Camille tagged me in a TikTok about ungrateful daughters, which stung until I remembered she still owes me $80 for concert tickets. It didn't matter how clear I was about why we did this. In their eyes, I wasn't just disobedient. I was an active threat to the family brand. Because that's what I'd become to them, a failed asset in a crumbling deal. The motel we stayed in that night reeked of cigarette smoke and mildew, and the Wi-Fi barely reached past the vending machine near the lobby, but it was ours. It was our first night together as husband and wife, curled up under a thin blanket watching conspiracy documentaries on Griffin's cracked phone screen and eating leftover pizza from a place that forgot the garlic knots. He tried to cheer me up by doing voices for the hotel carpet pattern, and I laughed so hard I forgot how broke we were. The Vineyard venue called the next morning. Apparently, my parents had tried to cancel the engagement party, but it was too late to get a refund. They're now telling people I pressured them into booking it, rewriting the timeline like this whole thing was my doing all along. I'm being painted as the villain in group chats and church circles I've never even been part of. My dad told one of his co-workers that I'm going through a rough phase and that I'll come crawling back once I realize Griffin isn't good enough. Meanwhile, Griffin and I are applying for a one-bedroom apartment with no dishwasher, hoping our references check out. Doug's wife has officially moved in with her sister after finding out about a second mortgage he took out behind her back. Tessa heard through the grapevine that Clyde has finally admitted to having a girlfriend, a single mom with a 5-year-old, and has moved in with her. Apparently, they've been together for over a year, but Doug refused to acknowledge her existence because she didn't fit his image of the perfect partner. The entire illusion collapsed faster than anyone expected. The wedding, the merger, the succession plan, all of it burned out the second I said no. Griffin's been quiet through all this. Not distant, just steady. He holds my hand when I check my messages and find new guilt trips from family members who claim they're just worried. He pulls me back from the edge with dumb jokes and badly made coffee and ideas about how we can turn our lives into something real without needing anyone else's permission. We don't have much. We're still sleeping on a futon, and our entire kitchen fits into one drawer. But when I look at him across the room, humming while sorting clean socks, I feel something I never once felt sitting across from Clyde or listening to my dad talk about contracts. I feel free. Not happy all the time. Not stress-free. But real. Whole. Free. And I'd choose that over silk centerpieces and fancy table settings any day of the week. I wasn't expecting to be back at my parents' house so soon after everything. But when Tessa called in a panic about water leaking into the basement, I didn't think twice. Griffin and I drove over in his wheezing car, still making that clunking sound like it's threatening to quit life altogether, and parked down the street to avoid any unexpected driveway confrontations. My parents weren't home. They were at some church fundraiser, which felt almost laughable given everything they'd been doing behind the scenes, while preaching loyalty and values from the pulpit of family pride. We rushed around stacking boxes on chairs, stuffing towels under door frames, and trying to salvage anything that hadn't already been soaked in muddy rainwater. While shifting waterlogged cardboard away from the furnace, I noticed something I hadn't seen before: a rusted old filing cabinet tipped sideways under a blanket of damp winter coats. The top drawer was open, papers fanned out like someone had given up halfway through organizing a secret. I grabbed the top stack, thinking maybe I could save a few documents before the water warped the ink completely, but what I found didn't belong in any normal family storage bin. Loan documents. So many of them. Some recent. Some old enough to be brittle. All of them tied to Doug's business and co-signed by my father. The dates formed a timeline of failures so clear and so desperate I could feel the anxiety bleed through the page. Small loans at first, repair costs, equipment upgrades. Then bigger ones, labeled emergency funds and operational gaps. I sat on the stairs, dripping wet, flipping through pages while Tessa ran around with plastic bins and a flashlight, trying to keep the breaker from shorting out. One loan was marked final notice in red ink. Another had a schedule with missed payments circled in shaky handwriting. This wasn't just poor planning or temporary misfortune. This was drowning in slow motion. Hidden in the middle of the pile was something worse: printed email exchanges between my dad and a development company I'd never heard of, their logo stamped in neat corporate fonts across every page. The tone was clear. They were interested in acquiring both businesses, but only as a pair and only under specific terms. They wanted assurance of longevity, stability, and proof that the operations would remain family-owned and managed. Their words, not mine. Which suddenly made the whole arranged marriage make perfect, sickening sense. This wasn't about Clyde and me being a good match or building something together. It was about performance. Selling the idea of two loyal families fused into one united business dynasty. The emails didn't talk about people, they talked about assets. I wasn't a daughter. I was a placeholder in a contract, a living clause in a negotiation they were praying would save them from financial ruin. One thread in particular spelled it out with chilling clarity. The merger will appear stronger with a family bond between the inheritors. Inheritors. Like we were part of a bloodline investment portfolio. Just when I thought I couldn't feel more disgusted, Tessa pulled out another box from behind the tipped cabinet. Inside were handwritten notes and rough drafts of contracts Doug had apparently started drawing up with my dad. Itemized sales of equipment, inventory counts, estimates of profit projections if the merger went through. But what stopped me cold was a payment schedule attached to one of Doug's loan documents, where my dad had written Marley's engagement May. Full confirmation before August. My name. A timeline. A commitment tied to financial forecasting. I had been turned into a deadline. Tessa knelt beside me, her face pale and stunned as I showed her the pages. She didn't say much, just read over my shoulder, quietly cursing under her breath. When I reached for my phone and took pictures of every page before the water could ruin them, she didn't ask what I planned to do with them. She knew. I sent them to Clyde. Not because I thought he could fix anything, but because he deserved to see exactly how deep his dad had dragged him into this mess. His reply came an hour later. Well, that explains the pressure. Apparently, Doug had been pushing him hard over the past few months. More talk about responsibility, future planning, stepping up for the family. He'd even tried to force a breakup with Clyde's girlfriend by telling him she was a distraction. Clyde had been caving under the guilt, not realizing he wasn't just being pressured into adulthood. He was being sold as part of a recovery package. By the next day, the fallout had begun. Camille came over with ramen and more gossip than soup. Doug's wife had found out about the second mortgage he'd taken out behind her back, and she'd moved in with her sister, changed the locks, and canceled his cell service. Clyde told his family everything. He'd moved in with his girlfriend and her daughter full-time, and from what I hear, he's happier than anyone's seen him in years. He also stopped pretending he wanted anything to do with the business. Back at our apartment, the tiny one with no dishwasher and the mysterious carpet stain that sort of looks like a sea turtle, I finally felt something like peace. Not because things were good. They weren't. Griffin's working double shifts delivering groceries in a car that can barely turn left, and I'm piecing together income from Poshmark sales and bookstore hours that barely cover groceries. But the weight in my chest had shifted. It wasn't gone, but it wasn't a secret anymore. The truth was ugly, but at least it was out. My dad still won't talk to me directly, but Tessa says he's been asking weird questions. Whether we have enough food, if we have heating, whether the car has snow tires. My mom stopped posting angry rants and started sharing sad Pinterest quotes about daughters growing up and forgetting their roots. I don't know what that means, and I'm too tired to figure it out. The development deal fell through after the merger collapsed. No business marriage, no family-run longevity, no neat succession narrative. Just two struggling companies now standing alone in the wind. Part of me feels bad, but not enough to change anything. I didn't cause this. I just refuse to become the solution to someone else's failure. Griffin and I are still living paycheck to paycheck, eating off mismatched thrift store dishes and pretending our lamp isn't just a flashlight shoved inside a laundry basket. But we're together, and we're honest, and every step we take is ours alone. And for now, that's enough. I didn't think we'd go to Thanksgiving, not after everything that had happened, not after months of silence broken only by awkward texts from my mother and secondhand updates through Tessa. But when Griffin's last paycheck barely covered rent, and our fridge held nothing but mustard packets and a half-eaten bag of lettuce, the idea of a full plate of warm food became too tempting to turn down. My mom had been hinting for weeks, sending messages like, "We'll be here if you want to stop by," and "Your cousins would love to see you," conveniently leaving out the fact that most of them had called me a disgrace in family group chats just a few months earlier. Griffin was the one who finally said it out loud while changing a flat tire in the parking lot. "Free food's free food," he muttered, wiping grease off his hands with a t-shirt that used to be white. So, we went. Not dressed up, not ready for a reunion. Just two tired people hoping the stuffing hadn't run out. When we walked in, the house smelled the same as it always did on holidays. Roast turkey, sweet potato casserole, a faint scent of cinnamon that came from the old plug-in wall warmer my mom refuses to replace. My dad didn't say anything when we arrived. He just nodded at Griffin and went back to carving the turkey like we hadn't detonated a grenade in his life plans less than 6 months ago. My mom hugged me too tightly and said I looked healthy, which is her polite way of saying, "You haven't completely collapsed yet." We found seats at the edge of the table, just close enough to be part of things, but far enough away that no one could corner us for emotional ambushes. Aunt Denise made pointed remarks about unconventional relationships while refilling her wine glass every 10 minutes, and Uncle Frank spent the whole meal pretending we didn't exist. Tessa and Camille, however, were on full protective duty, deflecting snide comments, changing subjects mid-sentence, and physically stepping between me and anyone who looked ready to deliver unsolicited life advice. Camille had even brought a pie from a bakery downtown, store-bought, but with my name scribbled in frosting like a peace offering disguised as dessert. The biggest surprise of the day was seeing Doug's ex-wife walk through the door with a casserole in one hand and a new haircut that practically screamed reinvention. Apparently, she and my mom still talk, bonded by betrayal and a shared love of passive-aggressive crafts. She spent most of dinner talking about her healing journey and how she's taking pottery classes now, which might have been cringeworthy if it hadn't been so sincerely defiant. My dad avoided eye contact with her the entire time and focused very hard on his mashed potatoes. Then came the kicker. Cousin Derek, different Derek, not Joel's friend, stood up and casually announced his engagement to his girlfriend of 3 months, and within seconds the entire table was exploding into wedding planning mode. Napkin colors, venue options, cake flavors, everyone had opinions. My mom met my eyes across the turkey platter and gave me this tiny, weird wink like we were in on some secret joke now. It was bizarre. It was also the first time she'd acknowledged me without tension simmering underneath her voice. Back at the apartment, still cramped, still noisy, still barely holding together, we unwrapped leftovers like sacred treasures and ate turkey off paper towels because we forgot to wash dishes before leaving. The couch we bought from a neighbor down the hall is hideous and slightly smells like wet dogs, but it's ours. The TV sits on top of a stack of milk crates, and we've got one working lamp between the bedroom and living room, which we rotate depending on where we're hanging out. But it's home. It's not glamorous or impressive or anything you'd post about unless you were being ironic, but it's real. Griffin started taking online courses in computer diagnostics and seems more focused than I've ever seen him. He still sings to himself while cooking, still forgets where he puts his wallet, still insists on naming all our houseplants after old movie stars. I've picked up more hours at the bookstore, and we're thinking about splitting a Costco membership with Joel just to finally buy groceries that don't expire in 4 days. There's nothing fancy about our lives, but they're honest, and every decision we make is ours. I still get updates about Clyde. Apparently, he's doing fine, streaming video games online and making actual money from it, living with his girlfriend and her kid who now calls him Pop. Doug's company folded a few months ago, and from what I hear, he's staying in a trailer behind his brother's place. The house was sold to cover debt, and the merger dream officially died the moment the bank repossessed the trucks. My dad's business barely made it through, but he cut costs, downsized, and moved into a smaller office in a strip mall that shares space with a nail salon. Tessa says he's still trying to act like none of it fazed him, but I know the silence isn't confidence, it's consequence. Strangely enough, my dad and Griffin are on decent terms now. Not friends, not warm exactly, but there's mutual respect in the way they talk about brake fluid and winter tires. Sometimes my dad sends Griffin links to discounted auto parts or videos about engine rebuilds, and even though he never addresses me directly, I know that's his way of reaching out. My mom brings me groceries through Tessa, little things like canned soup or toothpaste or a bundle of bananas. I know she means well even if she still can't say it out loud. We didn't fix everything. There's no magical ending where the family comes together in a group hug and finally understands me. There's still awkward silences, still tension under the surface, still moments where I look around the room and wonder if I've been cut out of someone else's story completely. But what we have now, this little life in our weird apartment with the Danny DeVito-shaped stain on the carpet and the neighbor kid who practices the trumpet at 7 in the morning, it's ours. I don't regret it. Not the fight, not the fallout, not even the motel room honeymoon with weak Wi-Fi and free pie from a sympathetic waitress. Every moment we chose each other over obligation was one more step away from becoming a pawn in someone else's survival plan. And when I see Griffin curled up on the couch, reading repair manuals like they're thrillers, or when he leaves me notes on napkins that say dumb things like, "You're the best roomie ever married me," I know I made the only choice I ever could. It wasn't perfect, but it was free. And sometimes that's more than enough.